The first phone call I ever made in a crisis was to my mother. The last phone call she ever needed to make in hers was to me. That's not a coincidence. That's a bond built over 53 years, one ordinary act of love at a time. Rebecca Watson was not a complicated woman. She didn't need to be. She was the kind of mother who showed up to every single one of my Little League games in a folding chair she brought herself, who packed my lunch until I was old enough to be embarrassed about it, and who sat up waiting every time I came home late, not to punish me, but because she simply couldn't sleep until she knew I was safe. That was her. That was always her. Love wasn't something Rebecca Watson talked about. It was something she did, daily, quietly, without keeping score. When my father passed, 12 years ago, a Wednesday morning in November, the kind of day that permanently changes the color of a month, she didn't fall apart. She grieved the way she did everything else, with dignity, with her chin up. She sold one car to cover the funeral costs without telling me until it was done, kept the house running on a fixed income, and still managed to have a hot meal on the table every Sunday for anyone who showed up. She never once called me to say she was struggling. Not once. In 12 years. So understand, when Rebecca Watson called me at 7:42 on a Wednesday morning and said her chest felt funny, I didn't hesitate. I didn't calculate. I didn't weigh my options because 53 years of that woman's love doesn't produce a man who hesitates. It produces a man who moves. Immediately. Without question. Without condition. What it doesn't prepare you for is the person standing between you and the door. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get settled, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Let me back up. My name is Wesley Watson. I'm 53 years old. I coach youth baseball on weekends, and I have been the kind of husband who thought that keeping the peace was the same thing as having peace. I was wrong. Took me a while. But I got there. It was a Wednesday, January 14th, 7:42 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I was standing in the kitchen watching the coffee drip. Slowly, like it too, didn't want the day to start, when my phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. I picked up on the second ring. Wesley. Her voice was thin, not her usual voice. Rebecca Watson didn't do thin. This woman had survived a husband, a recession, and a hip replacement without asking anyone for a single thing. Mom, you okay? I didn't want to bother you. There it is, 82 years old and still apologizing for existing. Funny how, I said, already moving toward the hallway. Just tight, and my left arm keeps going. She stopped. Mom, I'm sure it's nothing. Mom, stop, I'm coming. I hung up and stood there for exactly 3 seconds. My car, a 2019 Chevy Silverado, was sitting at Kowalski's Auto on Flatbush Street. Alternator, they'd called yesterday. Wouldn't be ready until Friday at the earliest. Okay, think Wesley, think. Eve's car. A silver Honda CR-V, sitting fat and unbothered in the driveway. Full tank. She'd filled it up herself on Monday. Eve was upstairs. I could hear the shower running. That long, luxurious 30-minute shower she took every morning like she was preparing for a photo shoot. I went to the bottom of the stairs. Eve. The shower kept running. Eve. The water stopped. A long pause. What? Not what is in concern. What is in this better be important. I need to borrow your car. My mom's having chest pains. I need to take her to St. Francis. I will be right back. Silence. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone has already decided and is just deciding how to say it. She appeared at the top of the stairs 30 seconds later, towel on her head, robe tied at the waist, face completely unreadable. Wesley, I can't today. Eve, my mom's having chest pains. Her left arm. I heard you. She leaned against the doorframe, crossed her arms. Call an ambulance. She doesn't like ambulances. You know that. She had a bad experience when Dad, then call someone else. She was already turning back toward the bedroom. I have dinner with Joanne and the girls tonight, and I still have a full day of work. I'm not going to spend my whole day sitting in a hospital waiting room. I stood completely still. Did she just... Eve. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Her left arm is going numb. She stopped, turned halfway, and looked at me with an expression I will never forget for the rest of my life. Not concern, not guilt, inconvenience. She's your mother, Wesley, not mine. A pause. Figure it out. Figure it out. She went back into the bedroom. The door didn't slam. That almost made it worse. A slam would have meant emotion. She just closed it gently, like she'd told me we were out of milk. Like an 82-year-old woman's left arm going numb was a minor scheduling conflict she didn't have room for. I stood there for a moment. Just a moment. Then I pulled out my phone. Clinton Webb lived 4 houses down on the same block. A retired union electrician, 71 years old, drove a well-kept older Honda Civic that had seen better days but never missed a morning. Just like its owner. He was the kind of man who still shook hands properly. He and my mother had known each other for over 20 years. He'd been at my father's funeral, front row. He picked up on the first ring. Wes. What's up, brother? Clinton, I need a favor. My mom's having chest pains. My truck's in the shop. Eve's car isn't available. Can you take us to St. Francis? Not even a pause. Give me 4 minutes. I'll pull up front. That's it. No negotiation. No conditions. No dinner plans to check. 4 minutes. I called Mom back immediately. I'm coming, Mom. Clinton's driving. You don't need to do anything, just unlock the front door and sit down. You hear me? Sit down. Wesley. I really don't want to make a fuss. Mom. Yes. Sit down. A small sound. Almost a laugh. Okay, baby. Clinton pulled up in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. I counted. The drive to St. Francis Hospital on Woodland Street took 9 minutes. Mom sat in the back with me, her small hand in both of mine, wearing her good blue coat like she was going somewhere important. Because she was. She kept apologizing the whole way there. I'm sorry to drag you out, Clinton. It's nothing. I was just watching the news anyway. Was it anything good? Nothing ever is. She laughed, actually laughed, and I looked out the window at the Hartford morning, and I felt 2 things at the exact same time. Gratitude. For Clinton. And something else. Something cold and quiet. For Eve. I didn't examine it yet. I just let it sit there. St. Francis was busy for a Wednesday morning. We checked in at the ER at 8:27 a.m. A nurse named Beverly, broad shoulders, no nonsense, the kind of woman who'd seen everything twice, got Mom into a room within 15 minutes. The doctor on call was a tall man named Dr. Raymond Cole. Calm voice. Deliberate hands. He didn't rush. Mrs. Watson, I want to run an EKG and check your enzyme levels. The symptoms you're describing, we don't ignore those at your age. Mom looked at me. Her eyes were asking me if she should be scared. Do whatever he says, Mom, I told her. She nodded. Then she reached up and touched my face. You came, she said, simply, like she hadn't been completely sure I would. That nearly broke me. Mom, I'll always come. She patted my cheek twice, lay back on the pillow, and closed her eyes. I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Plastic chair, bad lighting, a TV mounted in the corner playing a game show on mute. I drank the worst coffee of my life from a machine near the elevator and didn't taste a single sip. Eve didn't text once. Not even, is she okay? At 11:04, Dr. Cole came out to find me. His face was measured, not alarmed, but serious. Mr. Watson, your mother had what we call a mild cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but her body was warning her. We want to keep her for observation, run a few more tests, adjust her medications. But she's stable? She's stable. She's also asking if there's a television in her room. I laughed, actually laughed. That's her. Can I go see her? Give us 20 minutes to get her settled. I sat back down, put my elbows on my knees, stared at the floor. Figure it out, Eve had said. Figure it out. While she went to dinner with Joanne and the girls. While her mother-in-law's heart was sending distress signals. I figured it out all right. I pulled out my phone and called Clinton, who'd waited in the parking lot the entire time like the man he was. She's stable, I told him. Thank God, he said. And he meant it. Clinton, thank you. Wes. His voice was firm, gentle. That's what people do. I let that sentence sit in the air for a moment. Some people. I stayed with Mom until 4 p.m. We watched half a game show, with sound this time. And she beat me twice at a word game she made up on the spot involving hospital equipment and state capitals. She was sharper than me on her worst day. Always had been. At 3:47, just before I left, she took my hand again. Wesley. Her voice had shifted. That thin morning voice was gone. This was her other voice, the one she used when she meant something. Yeah, Mom. Eve didn't come. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer right away. She had dinner plans. Just my name. That's all she needed. I looked at her, 82 years old, blue coat folded neatly over the chair, eyes as clear as they'd ever been. She went to dinner, Mom, I said quietly, with her friends. The words landed in that hospital room like something dropped from a great height. Mom didn't gasp, didn't raise her voice, didn't say a single word about Eve Watson. She just nodded slowly, looked toward the window. The afternoon light was hitting the Hartford skyline just right, gold and quiet and tired. She didn't say anything else, but I saw something move across her face, something that looked a lot like a decision. I kissed her forehead at 4:02 p.m. I walked out of St. Francis Hospital into the cold Connecticut air. Clinton came back to pick me. We drove home in comfortable silence. And somewhere on Blue Hills Avenue, with the oak leaves flying past the windshield, like the world was shedding something it no longer needed, I realized I wasn't angry at Eve. I was done. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Some people spend their whole lives making withdrawals from relationships they never bothered to deposit into. Eve had overdrawn for years. Thursday, January 15th, 6:58 in the morning. I woke up before the alarm. That's how you know something's sitting on your chest that sleep couldn't move. I lay there on my side of the bed, the left side, always the left. 11 years and I still slept like I was leaving room for someone who wanted to be there, and stared at the ceiling. Eve was still asleep. Hair spread across the pillow, breathing slow and even, completely unbothered. The woman could sleep through a verdict. I got up quietly, went downstairs, made coffee, yes, with the loud machine, and no, I didn't feel bad about it. Not even slightly. She chose dinner over my mother's left arm going numb. She could survive the coffee machine. I sat at the kitchen table and watched the morning come through the window over the sink. My phone was face down on the table. I flipped it over. No messages from St. Francis. No news was good news at 7 a.m. I thought about Mom, about the way she'd looked in that hospital bed. Small against the pillow, her good blue coat folded over the chair like she dressed up for the occasion of being sick. About the way she'd touched my face and said you came like she hadn't been completely sure I would. You came. 2 words. 82 years of love compressed into 2 words. And they nearly broke me all over again sitting at that kitchen table with my coffee going cold. She always came for me. Every single time. Without question. Without condition. The very least I could do was come for her. I was on my second cup when I heard Eve on the stairs. She came into the kitchen in her robe, glanced at me, then at the coffee machine, then back at me. You made coffee. Every morning for 11 years, I said, shocked it's still surprising. She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter. There was a beat of silence. The specific kind that married people know. The kind that's waiting for someone to bring something up. She finally brought it up. How's Rebecca? Rebecca. Not your mom. Not Mom. Rebecca. Like she was a coworker, like she was somebody's acquaintance at a work function Eve had forgotten she'd attended. Stable, I said. Mild cardiac event. They're keeping her another day. She repeated it slowly like she was tasting the words. Another silence. How was dinner? I asked. She blinked. Just once. But I caught it. It was fine, she said carefully. Wesley, I want you to know, yesterday was really complicated for me. Complicated. I let the word sit there between us for a second. Your mother-in-law's heart was sending distress signals, and you were at a restaurant. But sure, complicated. Wesley, Eve. I said it the same way my mother said my name the night before. Just the word. Just the name. Flat and final. She stopped. I'm not doing this right now, I said. I'm just trying to explain. I know. I stood up, rinsed my mug. I heard you the first time. Yesterday. At the bottom of the stairs. I picked up my phone, my jacket, my keys, my spare keys, because my truck was still at Kowalski's, and I walked to the door. Where are you going? She asked. To see my mother. I didn't look back. Clinton drove me again. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer opinions. Just drove, one hand on the wheel, old country station playing low on the radio. There's a specific kind of friendship that doesn't need words to function. Clinton and I had that. Always had. We parked at St. Francis at 8:40 a.m. "I'll be here," he said. "Clinton, man, you don't have to." "Wes." He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "I'll be here." Some people show up. Make a note of who they are. Write it somewhere permanent. Mom was sitting up when I got to her room. Color back in her face. The thin voice completely gone. She was wearing her own nightgown. She'd refused the hospital gown after the first night, which honestly I respected deeply, and she had her reading glasses on, a crossword puzzle book open in her lap. 7 letters, she said the second I walked in. Betrayal. I stopped in the doorway, stared at her. She looked up over her glasses with the straightest face I'd ever seen on a human being. "For the crossword, Wesley." I laughed so hard the nurse looked in from the hallway. "Perfect," I said, dropping into the chair beside her bed. "Perfect." She counted the boxes, wrote it in, nodded with deep satisfaction. "You always were the smart one. I'm your only child, Mom. And still the smart one." We sat like that for a while. Easy. Quiet. The kind of quiet that only exists between people who have loved each other long enough to not need to fill every silence. She finished 2 more clues. I drank the terrible hospital coffee and didn't complain, because sitting in that room with her, even in a hard plastic chair, drinking something that tasted like regret, was exactly where I wanted to be. Where I would always want to be. Then she closed the book, set it on the bedside table, folded her hands in her lap. "Here we go. I want to call Paul this morning," she said. "Paul Logan. Mr. Paul Logan, attorney at law, Hartford County, 31 years in practice. He'd handled my father's estate. He'd drawn up Mom's will 6 years ago. Sharp man. Precise. The kind of lawyer who listened more than he talked, which in my experience was rarer than it should be. I kept my voice careful. "Okay. I've been thinking," she said, "since last night." "Mom, you don't have to. Wesley Andrew Watson. Full name. All 3. I hadn't heard all 3 since I was 17 and came home 40 minutes past curfew. Do not finish that sentence." I closed my mouth. She looked at me with those clear, steady eyes. The Hartford light was coming through the window again, softer this morning. It made her look younger somehow. Or maybe it just made her look exactly like herself, exactly like the woman who had packed my lunch and sat up waiting, and sold a car without telling me, and made Sunday dinners for 34 years on Maplewood Drive. My mother, the most constant thing in my life. "I've worked my whole life," she said quietly. "Your father and I, we scrimped and saved and went without, so that what we built would mean something. So it would go somewhere that mattered." A pause. "To people who showed up. I didn't say a word. Eve didn't show up, Wesley. I know. Not just yesterday." She picked up her crossword book. "Not to work on it, just to hold something. Not at your father's funeral repast. Not when I had the hip surgery and needed rides to physical therapy. Not at Christmas 2 years ago when I had that flu and you had to leave dinner to check on me." She looked up. "And not yesterday, when my heart was failing. She went to dinner." Every single example landed like a stone in still water, dropping slow, sinking deep. Because she was right. She had always been right, and I had been making excuses for years. "Mom, I'm not angry," she said. And the remarkable thing was, she wasn't. Her voice was completely calm, steady as a hand on a Bible. "I'm just accurate." She reached for her phone on the bedside table, found the small folded piece of paper from inside her glasses case. A phone number, written in her handwriting, neat and deliberate. "Mr. Paul Logan, direct line." She'd come prepared. My mother didn't make impulsive decisions. This had been building longer than one hospital stay. "Do you want me to step out?" I asked. She considered it for a moment. Then, "No. Stay. Stay." One word, and everything in me went still and grateful. She dialed at 9:22 a.m. He picked up on the second ring. "Paul Logan." "Paul, it's Rebecca Watson. I hope I'm not catching you early." "Mrs. Watson." His voice warmed immediately. "Never too early for you. How are you?" "I'm in the hospital, actually." "St. Francis." A brief pause. "I'm sorry to hear that. Serious?" "Serious enough to make me think clearly," she said. And even in that moment, even calling her lawyer from a hospital bed the morning after a cardiac event, there was dignity in her voice. Grace. The kind that can't be performed. The kind that gets built over 82 years of doing the right thing even when it costs something. Paul, I need to update my documents. The will specifically. Silence on his end. Professional silence, absorbing, not stalling. Of course. Do you want me to come to you, or... Please, today if possible. I have some very specific changes in mind. I can be there by 2 o'clock. Perfect. She glanced at me. My son will be here. Very good, Mrs. Watson. I'll see you at 2. She hung up, set the phone down, picked up her crossword again. Just like that. Like she hadn't just changed everything. Like she hadn't just loved me in the most powerful, permanent way a mother could. I sat there for a moment, throat tight, eyes steady, barely. Mom. My voice came out quieter than I intended. You don't have to do this for me. She didn't look up from the crossword. I'm not doing it for you, Wesley. She filled in a letter. Calm, deliberate. I'm doing it because I've earned the right to decide where my life's work goes. And I've decided. She looked up over her glasses. Any other questions? I had approximately 40. I asked 0. No, ma'am. Good. She went back to the puzzle. Now go find me something edible from that cafeteria. Whatever they've been bringing me for breakfast tastes like a decision someone regretted. And for just a second, just one, I looked at her. This small, sharp, magnificent woman, in her own nightgown, in a Hartford hospital room, filling in crossword answers like the world owed her nothing, and she owed it everything. And I thought, I have spent 53 years trying to be worthy of her. I hope I'm getting there. Mr. Paul Logan arrived at 1:58 p.m. Charcoal suit, leather briefcase, silver hair cut close. He shook my hand firmly, nodded like a man who understood the weight of rooms, and sat down across from my mother with a yellow legal pad and a pen that probably cost more than my alternator. I sat in the corner, quiet, still, a witness. The conversation between them lasted 47 minutes. I won't put every word here. Some things deserve their privacy. But I will tell you this. By the time Paul Logan clicked his pen closed and tucked his legal pad back into that briefcase, the document that Eve Watson had been silently counting on for 11 years of marriage had been fundamentally, irrevocably, and legally rewritten. The house on Maplewood Drive that Mom owned outright, paid off in 2009, Wesley. The investment accounts my father had spent 30 years building. Wesley. The jewelry. The furniture. The 1967 Ford Mustang that still ran perfectly and lived under a cover in her garage. The car my father had spent 4 years restoring with his own hands. The car that smelled like him on warm days when you opened the garage door. Wesley. And $20,000 earmarked specifically for the Hartford Animal Shelter on Brainerd Road. Because Rebecca Watson had volunteered there every third Saturday for 11 years. Because that's the kind of woman she was. Eve's name appeared exactly 0 times. Not my problem, someone had once said. Turns out, correct. When Logan stood to leave, he shook my hand again at the door. Your mother, he said quietly, looking back at her across the room. Already back to her crossword, already unbothered, already completely herself, is one of the sharpest people I've met in 31 years of practice. I looked at her too. Yeah, I said. I know. I've always known. I left the hospital at 4:30 p.m. Clinton was around to take me home. I got in, closed the door. He looked at me, read my face the way old friends do, not searching for information, just checking that you're still standing. Everything okay? Yeah, I said quietly. Everything's exactly the way it should be. He nodded. Put it in drive. We pulled out of St. Francis and headed back toward Asylum Avenue. My phone was in my pocket, silent. Eve hadn't called once all day. She had no idea. Absolutely no idea. But she would. Friday, January 16th, 8:14 in the morning. I was at Kowalski's Auto on Flatbush Street when it started. My truck was finally ready. New alternator, oil change Danny Kowalski threw in, because our kids had played Little League together and that's what neighbors did, and a fresh set of wiper blades I hadn't asked for. I was standing at the counter signing the invoice when my phone buzzed. Eve. I let it ring. Not out of strategy. Not yet. I just didn't have anything to say. Nothing that would land the way it needed to. Not yet. I slid the phone back into my jacket, finished signing, shook Danny's hand, and walked out into the Hartford morning. The air was sharp and cold and completely honest. I started the engine, let it warm up, sat there watching my breath fog the windshield, and thought about Mom, about bringing her home to Maplewood Drive where she belonged, about getting her settled in her kitchen with her tea and her crossword and her dignity fully intact. That's what today was about. Not Eve, not the calls, not any of it. Today was about bringing my mother home. My phone buzzed again. Eve. Again. Then a third time. Then a fourth. Then a fifth. Something's happening. I pulled out of Kowalski's and headed toward St. Francis. I had a mother to bring home. She was ready when I got there. 8:53 a.m. Blue coat, small overnight bag packed neatly. Beverly, the nurse, walking beside her, and another nurse holding the mandatory wheelchair. Hospital policy, completely non-negotiable. Mom had already argued and lost. With characteristic grace, she stood up from the wheelchair the second she cleared the automatic doors. "I can walk to my son's truck," she announced to no one in particular and everyone within earshot. I had a cardiac event, not a personality removal. Beverly laughed. The real kind, not the professional kind. She took Mom's hand in both of hers and held it for a moment. "You take care of yourself, Mrs. Watson." "I always do, baby." Mom squeezed her hand. "You're a good one. Don't let anybody tell you different." Beverly pressed her lips together. Looked like she was fighting something. Then she nodded and stepped back. Even in a hospital gown, metaphorically speaking, my mother left people better than she found them. I held the passenger door open. She climbed in slowly, carefully but independently, which mattered to her more than any medication, any instruction, any doctor's order. Her independence was the last thing she'd surrender, and we both knew it. I closed the door, walked around, got in. She looked at my phone sitting face up in the cup holder, lighting up every 30 seconds. Eve, Eve, Eve. 11 missed calls before 9 in the morning. Mom said nothing, just put on her seatbelt and smiled, faintly, out the window, like someone who had made a decision and was completely at peace with it. I got her home to Maplewood Drive first. The white colonial with the green shutters sat quiet and familiar at the end of the block. The house where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I'd done homework at the kitchen table, where my father had built a life brick by careful brick and left it standing when he went. The oak tree in the front yard had dropped most of its leaves. The porch was swept clean. The welcome mat said home in faded letters that had been there so long. Neither of us noticed it anymore. But I noticed it today. I got her inside, made her tea, the specific kind chamomile bag steeped for exactly 4 minutes because she'd told me once and I'd never forgotten. Checked the thermostat, checked the refrigerator, went through the new medications from Dr. Cole one by one, reading the labels out loud while she listened with her hands wrapped around her mug. Wesley. This one's for the blood pressure, twice a day with food. She was watching me from across the kitchen table. The table where she'd made every birthday cake, where she'd helped me with algebra, where she'd sat the morning after my father died and held my hand without saying a single word, because some things don't need words. "Sit down," she said softly. I sat. She reached across the table and covered my hand with both of hers. Her hands were small, warm. The hands that had packed my lunch and buttoned my coat and waved from the bleachers and held mine in the back seat of Clinton's truck on the way to this same hospital 2 days ago. These hands had been showing up for me for 53 years. "I need you to hear me," she said. "I'm listening, Mom. What I did, the will, I didn't do it to punish Eve." Her eyes were steady, clear, no anger in them, no bitterness, just truth the way she always delivered it, plain and warm and completely unmovable. "I did it because it was right, because your father and I built something together and it belongs with someone who understands what building something together actually means." She squeezed my hand once. "You understand that?" I did. I understood it in my bones. And Wesley, her voice dropped just slightly, not softer, more deliberate. "I need you to think about your life, not about the money, not about any of this." She gestured vaguely at nothing, at everything. "About whether you are happy, about whether you are loved the way you deserve to be loved." She looked at me for a long moment. "Because you have been showing up alone for a very long time, baby. And a man like you, a man who shows up, deserves someone standing next to him when he does." The kitchen was absolutely still. Outside on Maplewood Drive, a car passed slowly. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Everything she said was true. Every single word. My throat tightened. My eyes burned just slightly at the corners. I didn't look away from her. "Yeah," I said. and my voice came out rough and quiet and completely honest. "I know, Mom." She nodded once, slowly, like that was exactly what she needed to hear. Then she patted my hand twice, the same way she'd patted my cheek in the hospital room 2 days ago, and released it. "Good." She picked up her tea, took a sip, set it back down. "Now, are you going to answer that phone or not?" My phone was buzzing on the table between us. "Eve, call number 29. I looked at it. Looked at Mom. She raised one eyebrow. I picked up the phone, turned it face down, let it buzz against the wood until it stopped. "Not yet," I said. The corner of her mouth moved, just barely. "Not yet," she repeated quietly, like she was tasting the patience in it. "I'll check on you tonight," I told her, "and tomorrow morning, and every morning after that." She waved a hand. "I know you will. I mean it, Mom. Wesley." She looked at me over her glasses. She'd put them back on at some point without me noticing. "I know you mean it. You have always meant it." I left Maplewood Drive at 1:15 p.m., drove home to Asylum Avenue, parked in the driveway behind Eve's silver CRV, sat in my truck for a full minute. 34 missed calls. 34. I went inside. Eve was in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch in her work clothes, both hands wrapped around her phone like it was the only solid thing left. She looked up the second I walked through the door. Her eyes were raw, sleepless. Something in her face had shifted in a way I hadn't seen before. The careful composure she wore like a second skin had cracked, and underneath it was something that looked a lot like a woman who had spent the entire day realizing exactly what she'd done. "Good," said something quiet in the back of my mind. "Stay there a while, Wesley." She stood up immediately. "I've been calling you all day." "I know," I said. I set my keys on the hook by the door, and I thought about Wednesday night, about my mom lying in that hospital bed with monitors on her chest and an IV in her arm, about the EKG, about the enzyme levels, about Dr. Cole's measured face telling me her body had been warning her, and about Eve's dinner and the girl's type, about the breadbasket getting passed while my mother's heart stuttered in the dark. I let that sit in my chest for exactly 1 second. Then I looked at my wife. "Did you know?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "About the will? Did you know she was going to—" "No, Wesley. I didn't know." I turned to face her fully. I found out with everyone else. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, composed herself. When she spoke again, it was quieter, more controlled. But underneath it, threaded through every word like a wire pulled too tight, was fear. Real fear. The kind that arrives when consequences finally catch up to choices. She took me out. Completely. Paul Logan's office called to confirm the changes were filed, and "Wesley, do you understand what that means?" "Everything we've been expecting." "Eve." My voice was calm, steady as I'd ever heard it. "I understand exactly what it means." "Then talk to her." The composure slipped again, just slightly. "Ask her to reconsider. Tell her it was a misunderstanding, that I was going to come to the hospital. You just what?" She stopped. I took one step toward her. Not aggressive, not angry, just present. Completely quietly present in a way I hadn't been in years, because I finally had nothing left to protect. "You just had dinner with Joanne and the girls," I said, while my mother was in a hospital bed with a cardiac event, while I was sitting in a plastic chair in a waiting room drinking machine coffee under fluorescent lighting. I paused, while Clinton Webb sat in a parking lot for 3 hours, because that's what people do. The color left her face slowly, completely, like water draining from a glass. "Rebecca made her decision," I said, "the same way you made yours. Clearly, deliberately, and without asking anyone's permission. Wesley, please. She has spent 82 years showing up. My voice didn't rise, didn't need to, for my father, for me, for every person she's ever loved. She has never once, not once, chosen dinner over somebody who needed her." I looked at Eve for a long moment. She just finally stopped expecting everyone else to do the same. The living room was completely silent. Eve looked at me, really looked maybe for the first time in years, and I watched something move across her face. Not just fear now, something deeper than fear. The specific look of a person who has finally fully understood the size of what they lost. Not the money, not the will, me. She finally understood she had lost me, and the man standing in front of her, calm, clear-eyed, keys in his hand, heart finally at peace, was not the man who had stood at the bottom of those stairs on Wednesday morning still hoping she'd say yes. That man was gone. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down at it. My mother's name on the screen. She looked up at me, eyes wide. Something that might have been hope. I looked back at her for exactly 1 second, and I felt it. The last thread of something I'd been holding on to for 11 years finally going slack. Not with anger. With something quieter. With release. I picked up my keys from the hook. I'm going to check on my mother, I said. I opened the front door. The Hartford air hit me. Cold, clean, honest, and completely free. Oh, I said, turning back one final time. Eve stood in the middle of the living room, phone in hand, my mother's name glowing on the screen, 38 calls worth of consequence written into every line of her face. I looked at her for exactly 1 second, and I felt nothing but clarity. You should probably answer that. I closed the door behind me, and I exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't even know you'd been holding it. I stood on that porch for just a moment. The January air hit my face, cold and clean and honest, and something settled over me that I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. Not anger, not bitterness, not the hot rush of a man who just had enough. Just clarity. The quiet, unmistakable clarity of a man who had finally, after years of telling himself things were fine, after years of smoothing things over and swallowing things down and sleeping on the left side of a bed, leaving room for someone who never moved toward him, finally seen his life exactly as it was. I had not been married for 11 years. I had been enduring for 11 years. There is a difference. And standing on that porch, with my mother's voice still in my ears, and Eve's face still in my mind, I finally understood it completely. The hospital didn't make me see it. Rebecca Watson lying in that hospital bed with a cardiac event while her daughter-in-law passed the breadbasket at dinner. That didn't plant a seed. It burned the whole field down, and showed me exactly what had always been growing there. I walked to my truck, started the engine. The radio came on low, something old, something my father used to hum on Saturday mornings in the garage, and I let it play. I didn't make any decisions that night, beyond one. I was not going back into that house. Not that night. And somewhere, in the place where a man knows things before he's ready to say them out loud, I knew it wasn't just that night. Loyalty and love deserve a legacy. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family stories. I will see you on the next one.